I never thought my own daughter would throw me out in the rain. I never thought the man she married would steal my dignity when I was broken. And I never thought she would just stand there and let it happen. But they didn't know that life had one final surprise waiting for me. And when I revealed it, their whole world crumbled. Get ready, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's complete payback. Comment below and tell me what city or country you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. My name is Patricia. I'm 62 years old. Until recently, I believed in something called unconditional family love. I spent my whole life caring for my husband and our daughter, Sophia. Every dinner I made, every birthday I celebrated, every penny I saved was for them. When my husband died from a heart attack 2 years ago, it felt like my world ended. But I told myself I still had Sophia. I still had my baby girl. I sold our house in Denver, Colorado. Too many painful memories. Too many mornings waking up and expecting to hear his laugh from the living room. Sophia and her husband Ryan offered me a place to stay temporarily. At least Sophia offered. Ryan barely grunted when I moved my stuff into their spare room. I tried to stay invisible. I kept to my tiny room in the back. I did their laundry, cooked their meals, offered to take care of their dog, Molly, often. I tried to be useful and stay out of their way. But Ryan had a way of making me feel like garbage. His eyes always looked annoyed, like I was a splinter he couldn't remove. It started small. He would sigh loudly if I asked where something was. He would switch the channel if I was watching my shows. Once I heard him whisper, "dead weight," as he walked past me in the kitchen. I tried to pretend I didn't hear it, but I knew what he said. Sophia stayed quiet. I would look at her desperately, hoping for support, for anything. But she always made excuses. "He's overwhelmed," she would say. "His job is really stressful right now." I bit my tongue and said nothing. That's what good mothers do, right? But that evening, that horrible evening, it destroyed me. We were eating dinner. I had made meatloaf, his favorite dish. Sophia was checking Instagram. Ryan was drinking wine like he did every night. The silence was crushing. Then suddenly, Ryan looked up and said, "You know what? Maybe it's time we stop acting like this arrangement is working. We're not running a homeless shelter here." Sophia went stiff. I stared at him in shock. "What are you saying?" He smirked coldly. "I'm saying, how much longer is this going to last? You're not contributing anything. You're not working. We have expenses we never planned for. We didn't agree to support dead weight." My heart stopped beating. I turned to Sophia, desperate for help. Sophia couldn't look at me. She mumbled, "Maybe it would be better if you found somewhere more permanent for everyone's benefit." Everyone's benefit. I didn't yell. I didn't fight back. I stood up, went to my room, and packed everything I owned. 2 old suitcases. That's all that remained of my entire life. I didn't even cry while packing. The tears came later when I stood outside their building in Chicago, feeling the cold wind cut through my jacket, realizing I was completely alone. Sophia didn't say goodbye. Ryan didn't even look up from his phone. I sat on the sidewalk for 2 hours. My phone battery died. My spirit died. I remember thinking, this is what it feels like to be thrown away. That night, I stayed at a rundown motel, the kind where the carpet stains never come out and the ice machine is always broken. I lay awake staring at water stains on the ceiling, wondering how everything had gone so wrong, wondering what terrible thing I had done to deserve this kind of abandonment. The next day, I texted Sophia, "I understand. I love you forever." No response. The following week, I tried again. Then again. Christmas cards, little check-ins, complete silence. 4 months dragged by. Each day felt like a year. I applied for jobs everywhere, department stores, offices, even a diner near the highway. But nobody wants to hire a grieving 62-year-old widow with no recent experience. I considered house cleaning or childcare, but my arthritis was getting worse. The loneliness was suffocating. And worse than the loneliness was the shame. I had sacrificed everything for that girl. How could she discard me so easily? One night, while going through a cardboard box of old family photos, trying to feel connected to something, I discovered it. My grandmother's old journal. I hadn't opened it in decades, maybe ever, but something drew me to it. I sat on the edge of that awful motel bed, opened the cover, and that's when I found it. A name, a secret, a truth that changed everything. I remember that moment perfectly. My hands were shaking, my pulse was racing, because suddenly I wasn't just the mother who got thrown out. I was someone completely different. And for the first time in months, I actually smiled. They had taken everything from me, but they had no idea what storm was coming.
That name hit me like lightning. Richardson. I'd heard it before. It took me 3 days and multiple searches at the public library, but I tracked him down. Robert Richardson, a state attorney, still practicing with a small firm in downtown Seattle. I couldn't call. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, so I wrote a letter instead. An actual handwritten letter explaining who I was, who my grandmother was, and pleading for just one conversation. 3 weeks later, my phone rang. I'll never forget how his voice trembled when I mentioned my grandmother's name. He remembered her, not just as a client, as someone special. "I've been waiting for this call for years," he said. "There's something you absolutely need to see." I took a Greyhound to Seattle the following day. I packed light, just in case this was some elaborate scam. But when I entered that quiet office filled with law books and old mahogany furniture, I knew this was real. He placed a yellowed envelope in front of me. Aged, delicate. It was from Robert Theodore Morrison, founder of Morrison Industries, one of the largest shipping companies on the West Coast. A man whose face I'd seen in business magazines my whole life. A man with a wife, children, a corporate empire. The letter was addressed to my daughter, Patricia Ann. I couldn't finish the first paragraph before breaking down. He confessed everything. The secret relationship, the guilt, the love he could never publicly acknowledge, and then his promise. When I die, I have arranged for a portion of my private holdings, separate from my official estate, to be transferred to you through Mr. Richardson. You are my flesh and blood, and while I was too cowardly to claim you while alive, I claim you now in death. Mr. Richardson opened a thick folder. Bank statements, investment accounts, property deeds, stock certificates. The total value? Just over $2.3 million. I stared at those documents in complete shock. "This is actually mine?" I whispered. He nodded solemnly. "Has been for years. Waiting for you." My heart was pounding, not because of the wealth, but because for the first time in my entire life, I felt wanted, chosen. I didn't scream or celebrate or faint. I just sat there in stunned silence, letting this incredible truth soak into my bones like warm sunlight after endless rain. That night back in my motel room, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the same stained ceiling I'd been looking at for months, but this time I was smiling. They thought they'd destroyed me. They thought I was finished, but they were so wrong. I wasn't broken. I was just beginning. I didn't rush back to Chicago immediately. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. I wasn't just Patricia, the discarded mother, anymore. I was someone brand new. Someone who had been deceived her whole life and finally discovered the truth. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't suffocating in shame. I was breathing pure clarity. I spent another week in Seattle, walking through different neighborhoods, drinking coffee alone, watching strangers live their normal lives. People who hadn't been abandoned like I had. And for the first time, I didn't feel jealous of them. I observed them. I wondered which ones hid their own pain behind fake smiles. Who had been betrayed? Who had fought their way back from being invisible? Mr. Richardson didn't just hand me an inheritance. He gave me time to understand, time to process what I now controlled. It wasn't just money, it was power, and I had absolutely no idea how to use it. But pain has a way of becoming strength when you've been humiliated enough. When I finally returned to Chicago, I didn't go back to that awful motel. I rented a furnished apartment downtown on Michigan Avenue. Clean, modern, peaceful. The kind of place Sophia and Ryan would never dream I could afford. I started dressing differently, more elegant, more confident. Not flashy, just invisible in a completely new way, the kind of invisible that opens doors. I began watching online tutorials about investing, property management, business contracts. I studied the language of power, not because I wanted to become some corporate mogul, but because I would never be helpless again. That's when I discovered it. The listing was hidden on a commercial real estate website, a 24-unit apartment complex in Lincoln Park. Slightly outdated, but structurally solid. The address, the exact building where Sophia and Ryan lived. I sat staring at my laptop screen, heart racing. It was listed as a distressed sale, with the current owner behind on property taxes. Auction scheduled in 3 weeks. I didn't hesitate. With Mr. Richardson's assistance, I established an LLC, a completely anonymous business entity. I completed all the paperwork, wired the funds, and submitted my bid. I wasn't plotting revenge, not exactly, but I was going to control the one place where they thought they were safe. The auction happened on a rainy Tuesday. I won easily, quietly, legally, completely anonymously, and just like that, I owned the building where they lived, where they had humiliated me with 2 suitcases and cruel words, where they had crushed my spirit when I needed them most. I sat in my new apartment that night, holding the ownership documents, and whispered, "Let's see how Ryan likes paying rent to dead weight." 6 weeks later, official notices went out to all residents. Rents would be reevaluated, lease agreements would be reviewed, and for Ryan and Sophia specifically, the new monthly payment was quadruple their current rate. Not triple, quadruple the market value, plus accumulated late fees. Ryan must have had a complete meltdown. I didn't need to witness it to know. I could practically feel his fury radiating across the city. But this wasn't about money. This was about control. Ryan was someone who needed to dominate everything around him, and I had just ripped that power away from him. Silently. Sophia tried calling me 3 days after the rent notice arrived. It was the first time she'd contacted me since that terrible night. I let it go straight to voicemail. "Mom, I don't know if you've heard, but something really strange is happening. Our rent just went through the roof, like seriously through the roof. Ryan is absolutely losing his mind. I don't understand. Can we please talk?" I didn't call back. This wasn't about getting even. This was about consequences. They needed to feel the full weight of their choices. I drove past their building one evening after dark. Their windows were lit up. I could see silhouettes moving around behind the curtains. Sophia walking back and forth. Ryan gesturing angrily, his shadow unmistakable against the wall. I watched for a few minutes, then drove home. Part of me felt empty, part of me felt satisfied, and part of me still ached terribly, because even now, with everything I knew and everything I owned, I would have traded it all to be welcomed back. Not into their apartment, but into my daughter's heart. But I understood that wasn't going to happen, at least not yet. So I remained silent and I waited. Because sometimes the most powerful justice is the kind that never makes a sound. And my plan was far from over. I didn't realize how completely I had transformed until I saw Sophia at Target 6 weeks after the rent increase. She didn't notice me. I was 3 aisles away, hidden behind a display of discounted holiday decorations. She looked exhausted, not just tired, completely drained. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, the way she used to wear it as a teenager when she was upset. Her shopping cart was nearly empty, just basic necessities: bread, generic cereal, a few store-brand canned goods. I should have walked away. Instead, I followed her through the store from a distance, my heart hammering like I was committing a crime. She stopped in front of a package of name-brand coffee, then checked her phone. Probably a text from Ryan. Her shoulders slumped. She put the coffee back and grabbed the cheapest store brand instead.
That moment shattered something inside me. Not because I felt sorry for her, but because I remembered the little girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, the one who begged me to read her the same bedtime story every single night. And now she was living with a monster. I went home that day and sat in my beautiful apartment for hours, staring out at the Chicago skyline, thinking about how life had twisted us into enemies. But I reminded myself, this wasn't punishment. This was education, and education was long overdue. I had strategies now, not just the building, but a careful, methodical chess game. Every move planned, every step deliberate. With the LLC completely established and the property legally mine, I began improvements, small ones initially, fixing leaky faucets, replacing broken mailboxes, updating the laundry facilities, all under the name of my company, PA Holdings, short for Patricia Ann. Nobody could trace it back to me. Then came the announcement: mandatory annual safety inspections, required by city ordinance. Ryan responded with a venomous email to the management office full of legal threats and righteous anger. I actually laughed reading it. He was coming apart at the seams, and I hadn't said a single word. Meanwhile, I was becoming someone unrecognizable. I styled my hair differently now. Professional clothing. I carried myself with authority. I started attending real estate investment seminars under an assumed name, learning the business, making connections. Nobody questioned my background. They only saw a poised, well-dressed woman with substantial capital and intelligent questions. The perfect disguise is the truth you choose not to reveal. One morning, I passed Sophia and Ryan in the building's parking garage as I left a property inspection meeting. I kept my designer sunglasses on, hair swept into an elegant updo, official paperwork in hand. Sophia glanced at me briefly. Ryan didn't even look up from his angry phone conversation. Later that evening, I sat in my living room, drinking wine, marveling at how surreal it felt to walk past your own child and be completely invisible. Not because you're powerless, but because you're stronger than they could ever imagine. They couldn't see me now, because they only remembered the version of me that used to control. And that woman no longer existed. The calls from Sophia kept coming. Gentle, desperate voicemails. "Hi, Mom. I was just hoping we could talk sometime. I know things got complicated before." I didn't return them. Not out of cruelty, but because I needed her to experience the silence she created. And whenever I felt my resolute weakening, I would reread my grandmother's journal. Those words echoing through the decades. Patricia must never find out. She can never know. But I did know now, and with that knowledge came an armor that nothing could penetrate. I was no longer the woman begging for scraps under their roof. I was the woman who owned the roof itself. I always believed justice wasn't about revenge. It was about balance, truth without violence, a reckoning, not a war. But when I read Ryan's email response after receiving his quadrupled rent notice, I felt a small spark of satisfaction warm my chest. Subject: rent increase, illegal. This is completely unacceptable and probably illegal. Quadrupling rent? That's not a rent increase, that's extortion. I demand to speak with whoever owns this building immediately. We've been model tenants for 4 years and have never been late with a payment. This is highway robbery and I won't stand for it. He signed it, Ryan D. Mitchell, like his name carried some kind of authority. I read that email 4 times, then forwarded it to my property management company with a brief note. Please respond according to standard policy regarding market rate adjustments. No exceptions. Ryan wasn't just angry. He was in complete shock. His arrogance had never allowed for the possibility that someone could outmaneuver him so completely. He'd grown so comfortable being in control that the idea of answering to an anonymous landlord was driving him insane. Sophia tried calling me again that same evening. The voicemail was different this time, more vulnerable. Mom, I know you're probably not taking my calls, but I really need to talk to you. Things are really difficult right now. Ryan's stressed about money and he's taking it out on everyone. We're trying to figure out what to do. I miss you so much. Her voice broke at the end. For a moment, I hovered my finger over the callback button. I could end this right now. Tell her everything would be okay, that I'd make it all go away. But I stopped myself, because it wasn't okay. And I couldn't keep solving problems she helped create. Sophia had stood silently while he called me deadweight. She had chosen his comfort over my dignity. And now that the pressure was crushing her, suddenly she remembered my phone number. No, let her sit with this silence a little longer. The following week, I approved major renovations for the building. Fresh exterior paint, updated landscaping, new security systems. Ryan's inflated rent wasn't just a consequence, it was funding improvements for everyone else. That was the beautiful irony. All the other tenants were benefiting from his monthly payments. He just couldn't see past his own outrage to notice. He started leaving handwritten complaints under the management office door. Highway lights are flickering. Parking lot has potholes. If you're going to charge premium rent, provide premium service. Every complaint went ignored. Sophia stopped calling. She switched to text messages instead. Brief, desperate. Please call me back. I really need to hear your voice. Then nothing. Meanwhile, I monitored the financial reports. PA Holdings was not only profitable, but thriving. The other tenants were respectful, paid on time, and actually appreciated the improvements. Only Ryan was causing problems, and Sophia was trapped in his storm. But everything shifted when I received the quarterly building report. Attached were photographs from inside Ryan and Sophia's apartment. Peeling paint, cracked bathroom tiles, overdue bills scattered on their kitchen counter. They were struggling financially, cutting every possible corner. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt clarity washing over me. This wasn't really about money. It was about power. And Ryan was losing his grip on both. Word spread through the building that he'd started working overtime, picking up weekend shifts. Sophia was spotted walking to work instead of driving. They'd apparently sold her car. They were unraveling financially and emotionally, and I hadn't spoken a single word. That was what struck me most deeply. For so long, I had been the one pleading to be heard, begging Sophia to see what Ryan really was, to understand what she was becoming by enabling him. Now they were drowning in their own silence, and I was watching from a position of complete security. Literally, watching. My new penthouse apartment had a perfect view of their building's courtyard. Different neighborhood, higher floor, safer area. A view they would never be able to afford. I didn't spy on them constantly. Just enough to remind myself that I wasn't imagining things, that I hadn't deserved what they did to me, that consequences were finally catching up to their choices. And still, despite everything I now knew and controlled, some nights I found myself standing at that window, holding my phone, staring at Sophia's last message. I really need to hear your voice. The mother in me ached to respond. But the woman I'd become knew this was just the beginning. True heartbreak isn't loud. It doesn't come with screaming matches or dramatic scenes. Real heartbreak is quiet. It arrives as a voicemail you don't return, a text message left unread, the growing silence between you and someone who once called you mommy. Sophia's calls had stopped completely. Her texts became less frequent, but the damage in their lives kept expanding. According to building management reports, the tension in their apartment had escalated into constant fighting. Ryan was snapping at maintenance workers, demanding immediate fixes while refusing to follow proper request procedures. He was looking for someone to blame, someone to control. Sophia, from what I gathered through staff observations, looked like she hadn't slept properly in weeks. I didn't celebrate this. I didn't feel victorious. This wasn't about watching them suffer. It was about something much more painful. Watching the daughter I raised choose to stay trapped and call it loyalty. One afternoon, my property manager emailed an incident report. The downstairs neighbor had filed a noise complaint. Loud arguing, something crashing, shouting about losing everything, and this is your fault. Ryan had stormed out and didn't return until the next day. Sophia had stayed locked inside with all the lights off. I waited, not for Ryan's surrender, for Sophia's awakening. It took 6 more days, 6 long, heartbreaking days. Then, on a cold Thursday evening in November, my apartment buzzer rang. "Hi, Mrs. Sophia Mitchell. I think my mom lives here?" My heart stopped completely. I didn't respond immediately. I just stared at the intercom screen, frozen. Then, slowly, I pressed the door release. 15 minutes later, there was a gentle knock at my door. When I opened it, she stood there looking like a ghost of the girl I'd raised. Pale, exhausted, wearing a cheap jacket that had seen better days. She looked 10 years older than she was. We stared at each other in silence. Neither of us moved. Finally, she exhaled shakily. "Hi, Mom." I stepped back. She entered hesitantly, like she wasn't sure she belonged there. The room fell silent, except for the soft clink of teacups as I prepared chamomile tea. I didn't ask why she was there. I didn't ask how she'd found me. I simply handed her a warm mug, sat across from her, and waited. "I don't know how to start this conversation," she said, her voice barely audible. I remained silent. She stared into her tea. "Ryan isn't the man I thought he was. He's angry constantly, blames everyone else for everything. The rent, me, the weather. Last week he followed me to work because he thought I was hiding something." That made my chest tighten. She continued without waiting for a response. "I told him I hadn't talked to you in months, that I didn't even know where you were living." She paused, but that was a lie. I met her eyes directly for the first time. "I found your address 3 weeks ago. Building directory listed you under a different name, but same management company. It wasn't difficult to figure out." Of course it wasn't. Sophia had always been intelligent, but intelligence doesn't always equal courage. And now she looked like someone who had finally opened her eyes and despised what she saw. I didn't speak yet. "I miss you," she whispered, "but I don't even know how to be around you anymore." My grip tightened around the warm mug. "You left me," she said, voice cracking, "and I let you go. I let him throw you away." "No, Sophia, you didn't just let him. You stood with him." The words hit her like a physical blow.
She blinked rapidly, lips parting as if to deny it, to defend herself. But there was nothing left to defend. I stood up, walked to the window, gazed out at the city lights. Behind me, I heard her breathing become uneven. I didn't think it would get this bad. I thought I could manage the situation. You can't manage a man like that. You either survive him or you escape him. She didn't respond. She couldn't. We sat in that heavy silence for almost an hour. Two women who shared blood but had lost trust, maybe forever. When she finally stood to leave, she placed her mug down carefully, tears threatening to spill. She said, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to remember what safety felt like." I walked her to the door. She hesitated, then suddenly wrapped her arms around me tightly. I didn't hug back immediately. Then I did, but carefully, protectively, like someone trying to hold on to a memory without crushing it. When she pulled away, she didn't say goodbye. She just looked at me one final time and left. As the door closed behind me, I didn't cry, but I sank into my chair, cradling the warmth from her teacup like it was the most precious thing in the world. She had come. She had looked me in the eye, and now I knew the cracks in her prison were finally starting to show. Real power isn't about raising your voice or making threats. True power is pulling strings so gently that your target doesn't even realize they're dancing. And Ryan, he was dancing frantically now. After Sophia's visit, the atmosphere in their apartment became toxic. I didn't need surveillance to know this. You can sense a relationship imploding if you pay attention to the details. The building maintenance staff reported that Ryan had become completely unhinged, showing up at the management office 3 times a week, demanding to know the building owner's identity. He wanted a name, a face, someone to blame for his crumbling world. The fact that he couldn't find one was destroying him mentally. He started investigating. I knew he would. Ryan wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. I'd watched the way he used to monitor Sophia's social media when she took too long to respond to texts. The way he questioned her about every conversation with friends, every errand that lasted longer than expected. Controlling people can't handle mysteries. So, when he began digging into the identity behind PA Holdings, I was completely prepared. He started with basic LLC searches, standard approach. But my attorney had structured everything through multiple privacy layers. No direct connections, no public records linking back to me. Then came desperate emails to my property management company, pretending to be various officials, asking for owner contact information. Clumsy, transparent attempts. He even tried calling the county clerk's office, claiming to be a lawyer representing another tenant. They flagged the suspicious inquiry and reported it directly to us.
When those tactics failed, he turned his suspicion inward, toward Sophia. I don't know exactly what happened, but one of our neighbors contacted building management, expressing concern about the Mitchells. She'd heard breaking glass, raised voices, the kind of rage that comes from complete desperation, not just financial stress. The maintenance supervisor knocked on their door. No answer, but through the walls he could hear Ryan pacing frantically, muttering to himself, Sophia sobbing quietly. The silence that followed was more disturbing than the shouting. 3 days later, I found a threatening letter slipped under my apartment door. No name, no return address. Inside, a handwritten note. I know what you're doing. You think you're smart, hiding behind lawyers and fake companies. But you don't intimidate me. I'll discover who you are, and when I do, you'll pay for this. No signature, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Ryan wrote the same way he spoke, aggressive, sloppy, pressing too hard, like he was trying to punch through the paper.
I held that letter in my hands, pulse racing, not from fear, from recognition, because it transported me back to that awful evening when he looked me directly in the eye and called me dead weight. The way Sophia stood beside him, not just quiet, but complicit in my humiliation. Now he was the one grasping blindly, choking on his own powerlessness, screaming into an empty void. It was poetic justice, but it was also dangerous. So I escalated my response, had my attorney contact building security. We installed additional cameras, discreet, legal, standard procedure. I ensured the other residents were protected. This building wouldn't collapse because one man couldn't handle the consequences of his own cruelty. Sophia stayed silent after her visit, but I heard through building management that she'd been walking to her job downtown. They'd sold her car to cover expenses. Their utilities were being shut off periodically, lights out by 8 p.m. most nights, no heating during Chicago's brutal winter. The cracks weren't just in their relationship anymore. They were in their basic survival. And yet throughout all of this, I maintained my distance because this wasn't about revenge. It was about resolution. Letting Ryan's world contract until he understood exactly how small he really was, and giving Sophia a choice. Would she stay locked in that cage, or reach for the key I'd placed directly in front of her? I knew she wasn't ready yet, but the walls were closing in rapidly, and secrets have a way of seeping through the smallest cracks. I never expected that knock on my door so late at night. It had been eerily quiet for over a week. No management reports, no voicemails from Sophia, no more anonymous threats, just silence. The kind that feels like lightning building in storm clouds, waiting to strike. But when the knock came, soft and rhythmic, something deep in my chest clenched. I opened the door to find Sophia standing there, completely soaked from freezing rain, clutching a plastic grocery bag against her chest like it contained her last possessions. Her eyes were red and swollen, and when she tried to speak, no sound came out. She looked like someone who had finally run out of words. I stepped aside without speaking. She entered slowly, leaving wet footprints on my hardwood floors. I handed her a warm towel, and we moved in complete silence. I heated water for tea, poured 2 mugs of vanilla chai. She perched on the edge of my couch, like she was afraid to get comfortable, like she didn't deserve to stay. She stared into her mug with hollow eyes. "He's not the person I thought I married," she said finally. I stayed quiet. "He means I suspected. Part of me always knew something was wrong, but I convinced myself it was just stress, that he needed patience, that if I was supportive enough, he'd change back into the man I fell in love with." Still, I said nothing. She looked up, voice trembling. "He's convinced someone is deliberately targeting us. He's obsessed with it, going through my personal things, my emails, my text messages. Last week he followed me to work again, said he was making sure I wasn't involved in some conspiracy." A shiver ran through her body, and it wasn't from the cold rain. "He's been asking if I'm hiding something, if you're hiding something." That made my breath catch. She didn't wait for me to respond. "I told him I hadn't spoken to you in months, that I didn't even know what city you were living in." She paused, eyes filling with tears. But that was a complete lie. I looked at her directly for the first time. "I found your building 6 weeks ago, saw your name on a security notice, same property management company. It wasn't exactly rocket science to figure out." Of course it wasn't. Sophia had always been brilliant. But intelligence doesn't automatically equal bravery, and now she looked like someone who had finally opened her eyes and was horrified with what she discovered. I didn't speak yet. "I miss you so much. but I don't even know how to exist around you anymore. My hand tightened around the warm ceramic. You abandoned me, she said, voice breaking. And I let you go. I let him throw you out like garbage. Finally, I spoke. No, Sophia, you didn't just let him. You stood right beside him. The word struck her like a slap. She blinked rapidly, lips parting as if to argue, to make excuses. But there were no excuses left to make. I stood up, walked to my floor-to-ceiling windows, stared out at the glittering Chicago skyline. I begged for just one word that night, just one word of support. And you chose silence. Behind me, I could hear her breathing becoming ragged. I didn't think things would spiral this badly. I thought I could control the situation. You can't control a man like that, I said softly. You either survive him or you run from him. She couldn't respond. There was nothing to say. We sat in that crushing silence for nearly 2 hours. Two women who shared DNA, but had lost all trust, maybe permanently. When she finally stood to leave, she placed her mug down with shaking hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed to remember what feeling safe was like. I walked her to the door. She hesitated at the threshold, then suddenly threw her arms around me desperately. I didn't hug back immediately. Then I did, but cautiously, gently, like someone trying to embrace a ghost without making it disappear. When she pulled away, she didn't say goodbye. She just stared at me with broken eyes and walked into the hallway. As the door clicked shut behind her, I didn't cry, but I collapsed into my leather armchair, holding the lingering warmth from her teacup like it was a sacred relic. She had come to me. She had looked me in the eye and told the truth. And now I knew her prison walls were finally starting to crack. The anonymous invitation was sent on a Wednesday morning. Professional, businesslike, completely routine. Mandatory building meeting, property renovations, and policy updates. Community room next Thursday, 7 p.m. All tenants required to attend. Questions welcome. I knew Ryan would be there. I knew he wouldn't be able to resist. He desperately wanted a name, a face, someone to confront about his financial nightmare. He had no idea he was about to walk directly into the hands of the woman he discarded like broken furniture. The evening of the meeting, I arrived 30 minutes early. I wore a sophisticated charcoal blazer and dark slacks, simple, elegant, completely unrecognizable. My hair was styled in soft waves that barely touched my shoulders. I looked nothing like the broken woman who once begged for dignity at Sophia's kitchen table. The community room filled gradually. Residents trickled in, some curious, others annoyed, most just indifferent. Then Ryan burst through the doors like he owned the building. Sophia followed behind him like a shadow, eyes downcast. He didn't scan the room, didn't notice me sitting quietly in the back row. He marched straight to the property manager at the front of the room and demanded answers. "Where is she?" he said loudly. "I want to talk to whoever owns this place. Tonight." The manager remained perfectly calm. "All questions will be addressed during the presentation." Ryan scoffed. Sophia stared at her shoes. I sat silently in the back, watching. The presentation began with standard announcements: renovation timelines, new security features, updated landscaping plans, improved insulation throughout the building, practical improvements, smart investments, all funded largely by the inflated rent Ryan had been furiously protesting for months. Then the manager paused.
We'd like to thank PA Holdings for their commitment to improving this property and prioritizing resident comfort. The owner is here tonight and available for any questions. I stood up slowly. The entire room turned. I walked calmly toward the front, every step deliberate, every movement controlled. Ryan's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, recognition, then pure rage. I turned to address the room. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Patricia, and I'm the owner of this building." You could have heard a pin drop. Ryan shot to his feet so violently his chair scraped across the floor. "You? This is insane! What kind of sick game are you playing?" I looked at him with complete composure. "No game, Ryan. Just business." He stepped forward aggressively. "You manipulated this whole situation. You've been orchestrating this nightmare. You raised our rent to destroy us." I held my ground calmly. I purchased the building. I made improvements. I treated every resident according to standard market rates. What I didn't do was forget. He opened his mouth to continue his tirade, but I turned back to the group. "If anyone has questions about the renovations or building policies, I'm happy to discuss them after the meeting. Thank you." I stepped aside. The presentation continued, but the tension never left the room. Ryan didn't sit back down. He just stood there trembling with fury. Sophia sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes wide with shock. When the meeting ended, other residents approached me, shaking hands, asking questions, expressing gratitude. Some had suspected there was a story behind the building's transformation. Most had no idea about the drama that had been unfolding. Ryan waited until the room was nearly empty. Then he marched toward me, Sophia trailing reluctantly. "You think you've won something," he hissed, "but this is nothing. You've made a powerful enemy." I stared at him with steady eyes. "No, Ryan, I didn't make anything. You created this situation the night you looked me in the eye and called me dead weight." Sophia stepped between us suddenly. "Ryan, stop." He whipped around to face her, shocked. "What did you just say?" "I said stop," she repeated, louder this time. "She's not your enemy. She never was. You are." He stared at her like she had physically struck him, and in a way she had. Sophia turned to me, voice shaking. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about the building, the money, any of it." "I know. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me think you were helpless?" I looked directly into her eyes. "Because I was helpless the night you closed the door on me. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have money. I didn't even have a place to cry without someone complaining about the noise." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "I found out about my inheritance at my absolute lowest point, when I was counting quarters to buy dinner, when I hadn't had a real conversation with another human being in 2 weeks. That inheritance didn't just tell me who I was, it reminded me that I mattered, that my grandmother had fought for me silently without ever being able to show it." Sophia sat down heavily in a nearby chair. "I don't know who I became, the kind of daughter who could do what I did to you." I walked to the window, looked out on the street lights reflecting off wet pavement. "You didn't become that person overnight. It was small compromises, letting things slide, choosing peace over truth, believing that love meant loyalty even when it caused pain." She stood up and approached me slowly. "I've left him." The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. "He tried to go through my personal belongings again, my computer, my purse. I told him no. That was it.
He exploded, packed the bag, and stormed out, said he'd be back for his things. I changed the locks the next day. I turned to face her, genuinely surprised. I don't know who I am without him, she admitted, voice trembling, but I'd rather figure that out than keep disappearing. A long silence stretched between us, heavy with everything we hadn't said for so many months. Then she looked down at the floor. You didn't deserve what I did, what we did. I can't fix the past, but I want to try building something new. I walked back to her slowly, sat down in the chair next to hers. I used to dream about hearing those words, but when you say them now, they don't erase the past. They create a different future. She looked at me with confusion. I reached over and took her hand gently. You see me now. That changes everything.
We sat there together for a long time, the kind of silence that doesn't hurt, but heals, the kind that comes after truth has finally been spoken. Before Sophia left that night, she paused at the community room door. You didn't raise me to be weak, she said. I just forgot how strong you really were. I smiled softly. No, Sophia, you didn't forget. You just stopped looking. And now she was seeing everything, not just who I had become, but who I'd always been beneath the surface. When Ryan's final email arrived, I almost deleted it without reading it. The subject line alone made my stomach turn. This isn't over. But I opened it anyway, read it slowly, carefully. His words were sharp, desperate, dripping with the kind of panic that comes from losing control of everything at once. I know everything now about the building, about your so-called inheritance, about your mother's dirty little secret with Morrison. You think you're clever. You think you can destroy my life and just walk away? Let me make something crystal clear. If you don't reverse the situation immediately, I will go to every news outlet in Chicago. Your name, your mother's affair, everything. Let's see how your precious reputation survives when everyone knows what kind of family you really come from. I stared at the screen in complete shock. He had somehow discovered the truth about my parentage, through Sophia maybe, or his own desperate investigation. But I wasn't afraid, because I had been preparing for this exact moment since the day I bought the building. I forwarded the email to my attorney immediately. By noon the next day, Ryan received a cease and desist letter. Inside were copies of every threatening message he had sent to the property management office, the falsified documents he tried to submit under fake names, the harassment complaints we'd been quietly documenting for months. We didn't need to threaten criminal charges. One lawsuit for defamation and stalking would be enough. He panicked completely. I knew because Sophia called me 2 days later. He's gone, she said, voice shaking with relief. Packed everything while I was at work, left a note saying he was being hunted. Said you'd ruined his life. He ruined his own life, I said quietly. Sophia was silent for a moment. I'm sorry. Again, forever, for thinking he deserved my loyalty. I was scared. I understand fear. It makes you small. But you don't have to stay that way. It didn't take long for Ryan to try his revenge plan, posting vague accusations on social media, suggesting corruption, betrayal. He never used names directly. He couldn't afford to after the second letter from my attorney threatened a legal action for every word he published. He went completely silent after that, publicly anyway. Privately, I knew he'd never forget the day he realized the woman he'd kicked out with 2 suitcases and a broken spirit now owned his roof, his lease, and the keys to every door he'd once slammed in my face. Sophia, however, was transforming. She moved out of that apartment within 6 weeks, found a small studio near her job downtown, started therapy, joined a book club. She even took a painting class and created something for me, an abstract piece in deep purples and golds representing rebirth from ashes. I hung it above my fireplace. We started talking more frequently. Not every day, but when we did, it was genuine, honest, no more pretending.
the last piece of this puzzle came in an envelope from Mr. Richardson. Congratulations, Patricia. The building has been officially transferred. All tenants have signed updated agreements. The legal action against Mr. Mitchell has been resolved in your favor. You are now free to sell, maintain, or restructure the property as you see fit. I folded the letter carefully, held it against my chest. This wasn't just about money or property or getting even. This was about truth, about reclaiming my story, my identity, my power. The next morning, I called a commercial real estate agent. I was ready to close this chapter and open the door to a life I no longer had to just survive. I could finally live it on my own terms. I sold the building in early summer. The final paperwork was signed on a beautiful sunny Thursday. No ceremony, no fanfare, just a quiet signature, a firm handshake, and the weight of 3 years of grief, betrayal, and silence finally lifting from my shoulders. The money was transferred to my account the following day, but I didn't celebrate. Instead, I wrote a check, a substantial one. Half of the proceeds went to a local women's shelter, the kind of place I wish I had known existed the night I sat on that curb with 2 suitcases and nowhere to go. I asked them to build a me wing named after my grandmother, the Eleanor House. It was my way of honoring the woman who gave me strength through her silence, who hid a lifetime of secrets so that I could one day discover the truth and become more than anyone expected.
The other half I used to buy a house. Not a mansion, just a charming 3-bedroom in Evanston. Hardwood floors, a wraparound porch, enough space for quiet, for healing, for growing a garden if I ever felt like trying. The day I moved in, Sophia helped carry boxes. She didn't talk much, neither did I. But after we finished unpacking, she sat beside me on the porch swing, legs tucked under her, eyes scanning the tree-lined street like she was trying to remember the girl she used to be. "I remember riding my bike on streets like this," she said softly, "before everything got so complicated." I nodded. "You were always safe on streets like this." "I forgot what that felt like," she whispered. We didn't discuss Ryan. We didn't need to. His chapter had closed without drama, just silence. He had vanished into another city, another job, probably another lie. But not before signing a non-disclosure agreement and quietly dropping all his threats. The last thing he wanted was another legal battle, or worse, for the world to see the truth about the kind of man he really was. Sophia stayed for dinner that night. We made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, just like when she was small. She laughed when she burned one side. I laughed when she blamed my stove. It was the first real laughter we'd shared in years. After she left, I stood at my new kitchen window, holding a cup of tea with both hands, watching moonlight filter through the oak trees in my front yard. And for the first time in years, I spoke the words out loud. "I forgive you." Not to Sophia, to myself, because that was the hardest part, not rising from the ashes, but learning that I was never the fire they tried to extinguish. I was the spark they underestimated. They taught me that silence was weakness, but I learned how to weaponize it. They tried to erase me, and I became someone they could never forget. I sat down on my new couch, opened my grandmother's journal one final time, and tucked a note inside for Sophia to find someday. You don't need their love to be worthy. You don't need their approval to be strong. You only need the truth, and to never, ever forget who you are. The grandfather clock ticked softly in the background. My tea grew cold in my hands, but my heart
for the first time in so long, was finally warm. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to win some dramatic battle. I just needed to be who I was all along. And now, finally, I was home. Thanks for listening to my story. Don't forget to subscribe and share your own experiences in the comments. Your voice matters. If someone calls you dead weight, show them exactly how much strength you've been carrying all along. Respect is earned, trust is built, and family isn't about blood. It's about behavior. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. But also remember that people can change if they want it badly enough. My daughter learned that the hard way. And honestly, we're both stronger because of it. Never let anyone make you feel like you don't matter. You do matter. Your work matters. Your feelings matter. And if someone tries to throw you away, show them exactly what they just lost. The clock keeps ticking. My tea is cold, but my heart is finally completely warm.